On the banks of a wide, murky river, a child is crying. His mother pleads, desperate, as a crocodile slowly drags the boy deeper into the water. But this is no ordinary beast. This crocodile speaks. He turns to the mother and makes her an offer. If you guess correctly what I will do next, I will return your son. But if your guess is wrong, I will keep him. The mother, trembling, stares into the creature's unblinking eyes, and she answers, "You will not return my son." Silence, the crocodile thinks. If she guessed correctly, then by the terms of the deal, he must return the child. But if he returns the child, then her statement, "You will not return him," becomes false, which means she didn't guess correctly. So he shouldn't return the child. But if he doesn't return the child, then her statement was true, meaning she guessed correctly, and the crocodile must return him. Whatever the crocodile chooses, he breaks the rules of his own deal. He is trapped. This is the crocodile paradox, an ancient riddle that swallows itself whole. It's not about predators or rivers. It's about logic, and how even the sharpest logic can collapse under the weight of self-reference. This paradox belongs to a special category of puzzles that eat themselves, where statements refer to themselves in a way that creates an unsolvable loop. Just like the famous liar's paradox, this sentence is false. If it's true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. In the crocodile's case, the trap is in the condition. The promise is, if your guess is correct, I will return your child. But her guess directly influences what correct even means. There's no consistent way for the crocodile to fulfill the deal without creating a contradiction. This might seem like an abstract game, but it cuts deeper than you think. Because in philosophy, mathematics, and even artificial intelligence, self-referential loops like this create serious problems. The crocodile paradox is a close cousin to Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Gödel showed that any formal system rich enough to describe arithmetic will contain statements that are true, but unprovable. Statements that refer to themselves in a way that escapes the system's own logic. Just like the crocodile, the system collapses when it tries to judge itself from the inside. Even in modern law and ethics, this paradox echoes. Imagine a contract that says, "This contract is invalid," or a law that says, "This law applies only if it doesn't apply." These aren't just theoretical jokes, they can cause real-world legal confusion and logical deadlocks. And in the world of artificial intelligence, self-referential feedback loops can crash systems, corrupt data, or trap decision-making processes in infinite loops. The crocodile, it turns out, is still with us, just hidden in the code or buried in bureaucracy. And at the heart of this paradox lies a powerful warning. Logic is a tool, but it is not immune to paradox. Even perfect reasoning can lead to impossible conclusions when it turns inward on itself. So, what happened to the child? We never find out, because the moment the mother spoke, she didn't just trap the crocodile. She trapped reality itself, and in that silent pause, logic drowned. The hidden truth. Inside the trap of Simpson's paradox. Imagine two patients, two hospitals, and a matter of life or death. Hospital A has a higher recovery rate than Hospital B. Simple, clear. You'd choose Hospital A, right? But wait, when you break down the data, by age, by condition, by urgency, Hospital B actually has better recovery rates in every category. How can both be true? Welcome to Simpson's paradox, a paradox where the truth changes, just by changing how you look at it. It doesn't just hide in hospitals. It lives in sports stats, election results, hiring data, even scientific studies. It's not a riddle or a trick. It's math, and it's deadly serious. Let's go deeper. Imagine two surgeons, Dr. Green and Dr. Gray. Looking at the overall numbers, Dr. Green has a 90% success rate, Dr. Gray only 75%. But when you break it down, Dr. Gray handles all the hardest, riskiest surgeries. Dr. Green only takes the easy cases. And when comparing equal risk patients, Dr. Gray outperforms Dr. Green in every category. Simpson's paradox flips the story upside down. How? It's all about hidden variables, what statisticians call confounding factors. When we group all the data together, we lose context. We combine the hard cases with the easy ones, the outliers with the averages. The result is a distorted picture. The paradox is this: a trend appears in several groups of data, but disappears or even reverses when the groups are combined. Like watching water flow uphill, only to realize you were standing at the wrong angle. This isn't just a math curiosity. In 1973, the University of California, Berkeley was accused of gender bias. Men were being accepted at higher rates than women. A scandal? At first glance, yes. But when the data was broken down by department, something shocking was revealed. Most departments were actually more favorable to women. It was just that women tended to apply to the more competitive departments, with lower acceptance rates for everyone. The bias wasn't in the decisions, it was in the distribution. This paradox reveals a deeper truth. Numbers don't lie, but they can mislead, especially when we rush to conclusions without understanding the layers underneath. In an age of big data, viral charts, and instant statistics, Simpson's paradox is a warning, a reminder that what we see in the numbers depends entirely on how we slice them. Even AI systems trained on massive datasets can fall into this trap. If the underlying structure is flawed, if key variables are hidden or ignored, then decisions made by machines might look logical, but be completely wrong. Simpson's paradox teaches us humility. It shows us that the truth is often messier than it appears, that our instincts to summarize, to simplify, to generalize can betray us. So, next time you hear someone say, "The data is clear," remember, clarity is often an illusion. Sometimes, to see the truth, you have to take the numbers apart, one variable at a time. The Grand Hotel Paradox. Now imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms. Not just a lot of rooms, not thousands, not millions. Infinite. Every room is occupied, every single one. And yet, tonight, a new guest arrives at the front desk. He asks for a room, and the manager smiles. "Of course," he says, "we'll make space." How? Simple. He asks the guest in room 1 to move to room 2 to room 3 to room 4, and so on, forever. Room N moves to room N plus 1. Every guest moves one door down, and room 1 becomes free. Just like that, the hotel, already full, makes room for a new guest. This is Hilbert's Grand Hotel, a thought experiment dreamed up by German mathematician David Hilbert to illustrate the strange, slippery rules of infinity. It sounds absurd, but mathematically, it's flawless. Infinity isn't just big, it's weird. It bends the rules of logic, and it forces us to rethink what full even means. Now let's crank up the madness. Let's say an infinite number of new guests arrive. A whole busload, no, an infinite fleet of buses, each carrying an infinite number of passengers. The manager doesn't panic. He simply shifts every current guest from room N to room 2. That opens up all the odd-numbered rooms, an infinite number of them, for the new arrivals. Every single person gets a room. No one is turned away. In the Grand Hotel, infinity always has space. But this isn't just a whimsical math puzzle. It reveals something deep and disturbing about the way infinity works. In the finite world, logic is comforting. If a place is full, it's full. If you add something, you need to remove something else. But infinity laughs at this logic. Infinity is never full. Infinity can grow without changing. The Grand Hotel helps us understand the difference between countable infinity and uncountable infinity. It shows us that we can compare infinite sets, like even numbers, odd numbers, or all whole numbers, and see how they relate in size, even when they're all endless. And it gets stranger. Suppose every room gets one slice of pizza. Now we double the rooms. Do we need double the pizza? Mathematically, no. Each guest just shares with the next. Welcome to the paradox of infinite division. Or consider this. Let's remove every guest in a room with an even number. We've taken away half the guests, but still, an infinite number remain. Infinity minus infinity. It doesn't always equal 0. Sometimes it equals infinity. Sometimes it equals nothing at all. This paradox isn't just theoretical. It echoes in modern physics, where theories about the multiverse or black hole entropy confront infinite states. In computing, infinity plays into recursion, runtime complexity, and storage problems. And in cosmology, we still don't know. Is the universe infinite? And if it is, can it ever be full? The Grand Hotel is more than a building. It's a metaphor for our minds, for our limits, for the uncomfortable truth that some things cannot be counted, contained, or controlled. Infinity isn't just big, it's untouchable. And the moment you think you understand it, it opens the door to more. So next time someone tells you, "We've reached capacity," ask yourself, have we? Because in the Grand Hotel, there's always one more room. Schrödinger's cat, the box, the cat, and the collapse of reality. In a quiet lab sits a box. It's sealed, silent, unmoving. Inside it, a cat, a vial of poison, a tiny bit of radioactive material, and a quantum trigger. You don't know if the atom decayed. You don't know if the poison was released. You don't know if the cat is dead or alive. And until you open the box, it's both dead and alive at the same time. This is not science fiction. This is quantum mechanics. And this is Schrödinger's cat, the most infamous thought experiment in physics. It began in 1935 with Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger. He was troubled by the strange implications of quantum theory, especially the idea of superposition. At the quantum level, particles don't have fixed states. An electron isn't here or there, it's in a cloud of possibilities. A photon hasn't passed through one slit or the other, it's passed through both. Only when we observe it, when we measure it, do we force it to choose a reality. That's called wave function collapse. Before observation, infinite possibilities. After observation, one result. But Schrödinger took this to the extreme. He said, fine, let's scale it up. Put a quantum event in charge of something we can see, a cat. If a radioactive atom might decay in 1 hour, and if that decay releases poison, then whether the cat lives or dies depends entirely on that quantum event. According to quantum mechanics, until we observe the system, the atom is in a state of decayed and not decayed. So the cat? Dead and alive. A horrifying, absurd, and yet mathematically valid conclusion. Schrödinger didn't mean this literally. He meant it as a criticism of quantum theory. A way of saying, surely this can't be how reality works. But physicists didn't back down. Instead, they leaned in. They said, yes, that's what the math tells us. Reality doesn't choose until we look. Their implications are staggering. Is the universe made of probabilities? Does observation shape reality itself? Some interpretations say yes, like the Copenhagen interpretation, which claims that measurement collapses the wave function into one reality. Others go further, like the many worlds interpretation, which says all outcomes happen, but in separate branching universes. In one world, the cat lives. In another, it dies. And in another, maybe it turns into a dog. Who knows? Each observation spins off a new reality. Schrödinger's cat became more than a physics lesson. It became a symbol of uncertainty, of paradox, of how little we understand the foundations of existence. We use it in pop culture, in comedy, even in politics. But the core idea is this: reality may not be as solid as it seems. Until we observe it, it's just a blur of possibilities. And that doesn't just apply to cats in boxes. It applies to atoms, to particles, to the very structure of space-time, to the devices in your pocket, to the neurons in your brain. Quantum mechanics governs the smallest building blocks of everything. And yet, it leads to the most mind-bending conclusions. The box is closed. What's inside? It depends. On you. On when. On the act of looking. In the end, Schrödinger's cat isn't about the cat. It's about the moment where possibility becomes reality, and the haunting idea that until that moment, reality might not even exist at all. The sword and shield paradox. In a bustling ancient marketplace, a merchant stands tall, boasting to the crowd. In one hand, he holds a shield so strong, he claims, no weapon can pierce it. In the other, a spear so sharp, he swears, it can pierce any defense. The people cheer, amazed, until one voice rises from the crowd. What happens, they ask, when you strike your shield with your spear? Silence. The merchant freezes. The crowd leans in. Because this is the paradox. The sword and shield paradox. A timeless contradiction, first recorded in ancient Chinese philosophy over 2,000 years ago. It's simple, almost childish, but it hides something deep. If your shield is truly unbreakable, then nothing can pierce it. If your spear is truly unstoppable, then it must pierce everything. But what happens when the unstoppable meets the immovable? When absolute force collides with absolute defense? The answer? They can't both exist. It's a logical contradiction, a paradox born from extremes. This puzzle, known in Chinese as Mao Dun, literally means spear shield. And today, it's the word for contradiction itself in Chinese. Because that's what it is, a contradiction in terms. A clash between two absolutes that cannot both be true. But this paradox isn't just about weapons, it's a metaphor. It echoes through science, logic, philosophy, even modern technology. In physics, we ask, can something move faster than the speed of light? Can gravity become infinitely strong in a black hole? What happens when two fundamental laws of the universe contradict each other? In cybersecurity, We chase the perfect defense, unbreakable encryption, and at the same time, we build ever more powerful tools to break any system. Perfect offense meets perfect defense. But just like the sword and shield, both cannot be absolute. In ethics, we confront moral paradoxes. Can you protect freedom while restricting dangerous speech? Can you defend life while allowing the right to end it? Contradictions arise when we push ideas to their limits, when ideals collide, when logic folds back on itself. And in AI, we face a similar conundrum. Can we build a system that perfectly obeys human commands, while also protecting us from ourselves? What happens when the instruction conflicts with the protection? The sword meets the shield. This paradox teaches us something crucial. There are limits to absolutes. Pushing concepts to extremes often exposes their flaws, or at least their incompatibilities. It also reminds us that questions can be more powerful than answers. Sometimes the contradiction isn't a bug, it's the point. Because in that moment of tension, between the spear and the shield, we glimpse something profound: the boundaries of logic, the fragility of perfection, and the necessity of balance. So the next time someone promises you the ultimate solution, the perfect product, the unbreakable defense, the unstoppable force, ask them, what happens when it meets its opposite? Because somewhere, in every system, every philosophy, every idea, the sword still waits for the shield. The sound of a single grain. When silence becomes a question. In the heart of ancient Greece, a student walks with his teacher. The air is still. Philosophy lingers in every stone, every shadow. The student is clever, curious, but sly. He turns to his teacher, a master of logic, and asks, "Tell me, master, if 1,000 grains of millet fall to the ground, do they make a sound?" The teacher nods. "Of course." The student smiles. "And if just 1 grain falls, does it make a sound?" The teacher hesitates. The student presses on. If 1 grain makes no sound, and many grains do, then at what number does sound begin? This is the paradox. A question so simple, it hides its depth. A challenge not to physics, but to thought itself. It's known as the grain of millet, and it was posed by a Greek philosopher named Zeno. Yes, the same Zeno who gave us Achilles and the tortoise, and the arrow that never moves. This paradox isn't about millet. It's about change, continuity, and the threshold between nothing and something. If a single grain makes no sound, and adding 1 grain doesn't suddenly create sound, then how can silence ever become noise? Where is the tipping point? The paradox pulls us into the heart of one of the oldest problems in philosophy, the problem of the heap. If 1 grain isn't a heap, and adding 1 more still isn't a heap, when does a heap begin? It's the same logic, just dressed differently. Philosophers call this a Sorite's paradox, from the Greek word soros, meaning heap. It asks, how do we deal with concepts that don't have sharp edges? Is baldness defined by a single missing hair? At what point does night become day? When does childhood end and adulthood begin? These aren't riddles. They're real questions about language, logic, and the limits of definition. And yet, we live with these fuzzy boundaries every day. The paradox of the grain of millet reveals a strange truth. Sometimes even nothing can accumulate into something. 1 grain is silent, 100 grains, noise. But where exactly does the transformation happen? Some say it's a flaw in language, that our words are too vague, too imprecise. Others say it's a flaw in logic itself. Or maybe The flaw is in our minds, our need for exactness in a world that resists it. In modern times, this paradox has found a new home in digital systems, psychology, even law. How many bytes of data make a large file? How many crimes make someone a criminal? How many changes to a photo before it becomes a fake? We're constantly drawing lines. Even when the lines are arbitrary, the grain of millet whispers that truth isn't always black or white. It's in the grey, in the uncertain, in the space between silence and sound. And sometimes, that single grain you didn't hear was the one that changed everything. Olber's paradox. Why is the night sky dark? Imagine this. You step outside on a clear night. No clouds, no moon, just you and the stars. You look up, expecting darkness. And yes, it's dark. But pause. Think about that for a moment. If the universe is infinite, if stars are scattered in every direction, if space stretches forever and stars shine eternally, then shouldn't the sky be filled with light? Shouldn't every line of sight end on the surface of a star? Shouldn't the night be blindingly bright? This is Olber's paradox, a mystery that haunted scientists and philosophers for centuries. And it begins with a simple question. Why is the night sky dark? It was first formally posed in the 19th century by the German astronomer Heinrich Wilhelm Olbers. But the question itself is ancient. If the universe is infinite and eternal, then it should be lit from every angle, no gaps, no shadows, just endless starlight. So what's going on? Is the universe broken, or are our assumptions wrong? Let's break it down. Assumption 1. The universe is infinite. Assumption 2. It's static and eternal. Assumption 3. Stars are evenly distributed and they shine forever. Put those together, and the sky should be as bright as the surface of the sun. But it's not. It's dark, beautifully, hauntingly dark, which means something's off. For years, people offered explanations. Some said maybe dust blocks the light, but over time, dust would heat up, glow, and still fill the sky with light. That's not it. Some suggested stars are too far and their light too faint. But again, in an infinite universe, distance doesn't matter. The further you look, the more stars you find. So the paradox remained, until modern cosmology stepped in. The solution? It turns out the universe is not eternal. It had a beginning, a moment of creation, the Big Bang, about 13.8 billion years ago. That means there's a cosmic horizon, a limit to how far light has had time to travel. We can't see stars beyond that horizon because their light hasn't reached us yet. And it's not just time, it's motion. The universe is expanding. Distant galaxies are flying away from us. Their light stretches, becoming redder, dimmer, until it vanishes into infrared and microwave radiation. The visible light, it fades. And here's the final twist. The night sky isn't truly dark. It glows, faintly, with the afterglow of creation, the cosmic microwave background, the leftover heat of the Big Bang itself. It's not visible to the naked eye, but it's there. So Olber's paradox wasn't a mistake. It was a clue, a crack in the old world view. Proof that the universe isn't infinite, eternal, or static. The darkness of the night sky isn't an absence, it's a message. A message from the universe saying, I had a beginning. I'm expanding. I'm still unfolding. So next time you look up and see the stars, Remember, the darkness in between is just as important. It tells us that the universe has limits, that time had a start, and that space is still in motion. Olbers asked, "Why is it dark at night?" And in answering him, we discovered the origin of everything. The value paradox. Why is water cheaper than diamonds? You're walking through a desert. The sun is high. Your throat is dry. You haven't had a drink in hours. Suddenly, someone appears. They offer you a choice, a glass of cold water or a handful of diamonds. In that moment, the answer is obvious. You grab the water, because right now, that's what your life depends on. But step into a jewelry store in any city, any country, and you'll see the opposite. Diamonds sit behind glass, luxurious, priceless. Water, free from the tap, bottled for pennies. So here's the paradox. Water is essential to life. Diamonds are not, yet diamonds are far more expensive. Why? This is the value paradox, also known as the paradox of value, a dilemma that puzzled economists and philosophers for centuries. Even Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, was baffled. In his book, The Wealth of Nations, he wrote, "Nothing is more useful than water, but it will purchase scarce anything, while diamonds, which have scarce any value in use, are sold at exorbitant prices." How can something vital be worth so little and something frivolous be worth so much? It seems irrational, illogical, even unjust. But the answer lies in a powerful idea: marginal utility. Let's go back to the desert. The first glass of water? Invaluable. It saves your life. The second? Still important. But the 10th? You don't need it. You might even pour it out. The value of each additional unit of water drops because your need is already satisfied. Diamonds, on the other hand, are rare. They don't satisfy hunger or thirst, but they do satisfy something else: desire, status, beauty. And because they're scarce, people are willing to pay more. In short, value isn't just about usefulness. It's about context, about supply and demand, about how much someone wants the next unit of something, not the total importance of the thing itself. Water is essential, but abundant. Diamonds are non-essential, but scarce. And that's where price is born. This paradox doesn't just explain diamonds and water. It applies to everything. Why is art worth millions while air is free? Why do we pay for name brands but ignore generics with the same ingredients? The value paradox reveals something deep about human nature. We don't always value things logically. We value them situationally, emotionally, individually. And it's not just economic. In life, we often ignore the things that matter most: time, health, relationships, because they're always there until they're not. And when they're gone, we realize their true value. So the next time you drink a glass of water or pass by something you take for granted, pause. Ask yourself, is it worthless or just abundant? The paradox isn't just about diamonds and water. It's about how we see the world. And sometimes the most valuable things are the ones we forget to notice. The friendship paradox. Why your friends have more friends than you? You're scrolling through your feed. Everyone seems to be out with someone. Photos, parties, group selfies, laughs in places you weren't invited to. And quietly, a thought creeps in. Do I have fewer friends than everyone else? Here's the twist. That feeling isn't just insecurity. it might actually be true. Welcome to the strange truth of social networks, the friendship paradox. Discovered by sociologist Scott Feld in 1991, the paradox is simple and deeply unsettling. On average, your friends have more friends than you do. That's not a joke. It's not an illusion. It's math. But how can that be? Let's break it down. Imagine a small network, 10 people, each with a different number of friends. Some are introverts with 2 close connections. Others are social butterflies with dozens. Now think about this. The more friends someone has, the more likely they are to show up in other people's friend lists. That means popular people are overrepresented in everyone's social circle. It's a sampling bias. Your experience is skewed toward those who are more connected. So when you look at your friends, what you're really seeing is a highlight reel of the most connected people. No wonder they seem more social than you. It's not just you, it's statistical gravity. But the paradox doesn't stop there. Shows up in all kinds of networks. In college, your classmates probably have better grades than you. At the gym, others seem fitter. On social media, others seem happier, wealthier, more successful. Why? Because you're comparing yourself to people who are more visible. Those who show up more often, connect more often, and stand out more. The friendship paradox reveals something crucial about perception. What you see isn't the whole picture. It's a distorted lens, a world filtered through visibility. And this distortion affects more than just feelings. In epidemiology, it helps predict disease spread. People with more connections are more likely to get and transmit viruses. In marketing, it explains how trends explode. Popular people influence more peers. In mental health, it helps explain why social media can feel so isolating. Because even in a room full of people, you can feel alone, simply because the people you're watching seem less alone than you. But here's the twist. You are part of someone else's paradox. To someone else, you are the one with the active life, the big circle, the smile that hides the storm. Everyone's comparing. Everyone feels behind. Everyone is caught in the same illusion. The paradox doesn't mean you have no friends. It means you're seeing the world from the middle of a web, where the loudest threads are the most tangled. So next time you feel left out, remember this. It's not a flaw in you. It's a trick of the network. And just because your friends seem more connected, doesn't mean they're more fulfilled. Because true connection isn't measured by numbers. It's felt in moments. Quiet, sincere, real. The paradox might be mathematical, but friendship, that's still personal. Catch-22, the logic trap that has no escape. War, chaos, and a young soldier who just wants to survive. In Joseph Heller's novel Catch-22, there's a character named Yossarian, an army bombardier who wants out. He's terrified. He doesn't want to fly any more deadly missions. So he goes to the doctor and says, "I'm insane. I shouldn't have to fly." The doctor nods, but then shrugs. "Ah, but if you're sane enough to realize flying is dangerous and want to avoid it, then you're not insane. Which means you have to fly." Yossarian stares, trapped, stuck in a circle of logic that offers no escape. Then you're not insane, which means you have to fly. Yossarian stares, trapped, stuck in a circle of logic that offers no escape. This is Catch-22, a rule that contradicts itself. A situation where the conditions to escape a problem are made impossible by the very rules of the problem. And once you see it, you start seeing it everywhere. It's when you're told you need experience to get a job. But you need a job to get experience. It's when people say, be confident to be successful, but also, you won't feel confident until you're successful. It's when someone says, you're free to make your own choice, but punishes you the moment you do. It's logic turned inward, a trap disguised as a rule. The power of a catch-22 is in how rational it sounds, while being completely impossible to beat. And the original novel? It was fiction, yes, but the feeling it captured was real. Bureaucracy, war, authority, all systems where rules multiply until they defy logic, and people become cogs in a machine they can't escape. The term catch-22 has become more than just a literary reference. It's now part of our culture, a way to describe those maddening loops of logic that paralyze action. Want a loan? You need credit. Want credit? You need a loan. Want to be trusted? You need experience. Want experience? You need trust. Want to report injustice at work? You can. But only if it doesn't harm your standing. If it does, well, that's your fault. These traps aren't just logical. They're psychological. They create a sense of helplessness. No matter what choice you make, you lose. Try to leave, and the rule keeps you in. Try to fight, and your rebellion becomes more proof against you. But here's the question. Can catch-22s be broken? Sometimes, yes. By changing the system, by exposing the contradiction, or by simply refusing to play the game. Because at its heart, catch-22 is a tool of control, and control depends on people believing the trap is real. Yossarian eventually tries to escape, not just from the war, but from the logic itself. And maybe that's the real message. When the system doesn't make sense, when the rules contradict themselves, when reason becomes a cage, sometimes the only sane response is to walk away. The dichotomy paradox. Why you can never reach your destination. You're standing at the edge of a road. Your goal? To walk to the tree at the other end, just 100 meters away. Simple. You take a step, then another, then another. But what if I told you, you'll never get there? Welcome to one of the oldest and strangest paradoxes in philosophy. The dichotomy paradox, first proposed by the Greek philosopher Zeno of Elea over 2,000 years ago. Here's how it goes. To reach your destination, you must first get halfway there. Then you must get halfway of what's left. Then halfway of that. And again, forever. Each step gets smaller, but there's always another step to take. Infinity, hidden in motion. So according to Zeno's logic, motion is impossible, because to reach any point, you must complete an infinite number of steps. And how can anyone complete an infinite number of things in a finite amount of time? That's the paradox. It feels absurd. After all, we move every day. We drive, run, leap, fly. But Zeno's argument wasn't a joke. It was a serious challenge to how we understand motion, time, and space. If the universe is continuous, infinitely divisible, then how do things ever change? It wasn't just a puzzle. It was a crisis of logic. Mathematicians struggled with this for centuries. Aristotle tried to sidestep it. Theologians thought it proved that time must be finite. It wasn't until the development of calculus, 2,000 years later, that the mystery began to dissolve. Using the concept of limits, mathematicians like Newton and Leibniz showed that an infinite number of shrinking steps can actually add up to a finite distance. The key wasn't in denying infinity, but in understanding how infinity behaves. For example, 1 plus 1 to 2 plus 1 4 plus 1 8 plus goes on forever, but the sum approaches 2, infinite parts, adding up to something real. But even today, Zeno's paradox remains a profound reminder. Our intuition, what we think is obvious, can be misleading. Our world may not work in neat, simple pieces. Sometimes it takes thousands of years and entire fields of math to prove that the most basic things, like moving from here to there, are even possible. The dichotomy paradox isn't just about walking across a road. It's about everything that seems stuck, everything that feels out of reach, every dream, every goal, every change. Because yes, there may be infinite steps between you and where you want to be. But progress isn't about finishing infinity. It's about moving forward anyway, step by step, half after half, until the unreachable becomes real. The Stockdale paradox: hope without delusion. It's easy to be optimistic when things are good, harder when they're falling apart. But what do you hold on to when you're not sure if you'll make it? Admiral James Stockdale was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for over 7 years. He was tortured, isolated, left in darkness, not knowing if he'd ever see his family again. But he survived, and when he got out, people asked him, "How did you do it? What kind of mindset got you through?" He said, "I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted that not only would I get out, but that I would turn this experience into the defining event of my life." Then he added something unexpected. "But I can also tell you who didn't make it. The optimists." He explained, they were the ones who said, "We'll be out by Christmas." Then Christmas would come and go, then Easter, then Thanksgiving, and eventually they gave up. Here lies the paradox. To survive something truly brutal, you need two opposite ideas held at once: unshakable faith that you will prevail in the end, and brutal honesty about your current reality. You must never confuse the two. This is the Stockdale paradox. It's the ability to stare your darkest moment in the face, without flinching, without fantasy, while still believing that someday you'll make it through. It's not blind hope, and it's not cold cynicism. It's a mindset forged in fire. And the truth is, it doesn't just apply to war. You'll see it in people fighting cancer, in entrepreneurs surviving failure, in families going through grief. The ones who make it aren't the ones who pretend it's easy. They're the ones who say, "This is hard. This is the hardest thing I've ever faced. But I will not be broken by it." It's tempting to choose one side, to fall into despair, or to cling to false positivity. But real resilience lives in the tension between both. It says, "I accept the reality of where I am, but I refuse to give up on where I'm going." The Stockdale paradox is a compass through chaos. Not because it gives you easy answers, but because it gives you permission to feel the storm and still believe in the sunrise. In the end, Stockdale didn't survive because he denied the pain. He survived because he made meaning from it, and so can you. So when life pushes you into your darkest cell, don't lie to yourself. Don't break from hope. Stand in the paradox. And whisper to yourself with quiet, steady fire, "This will not be the end of my story." Service recovery: how a mistake can build loyalty. Imagine this. You're at your favorite coffee shop. You've ordered the same drink 100 times, but today they get it completely wrong. Wrong flavor, wrong size, cold instead of hot. You're frustrated. You think, "This place is slipping." But then, the barista notices. She doesn't argue. She smiles, apologizes, and within minutes, you have a perfect remake, plus a free cookie on the house. Suddenly, your frustration fades. You feel seen, heard, respected, and strangely, you trust this coffee shop more than ever before. This is the power of service recovery. It's not just about fixing a mistake. It's about turning a negative experience into a moment of deep emotional connection. The term comes from the world of business and hospitality, but the psychology behind it runs deeper than customer satisfaction. It's about human trust. Because the truth is, mistakes are inevitable. No system is perfect. No company is flawless. No person gets everything right. So the real test isn't whether you screw up. It's how you respond when you do. Psychologists call it the service recovery paradox. In some cases, people become more loyal to a brand or business after a mistake if it's handled with genuine care and speed than if nothing had gone wrong at all. It sounds strange, but it's real. Because people don't just want perfection. They want honesty. They want effort. They want to feel that someone cares enough to make it right. And when that happens, trust deepens. Let's take it to the extreme. In the 80s, a passenger on a United Airlines flight experienced a delay, missed a connection, and arrived a full day late. They complained, loudly. Instead of sending a generic apology, the airline's CEO at the time wrote a handwritten letter. He explained the weather issue, apologized sincerely, and offered a travel voucher. The customer was so impressed they framed the letter, and they stayed loyal to the airline for over 20 years, all from one mistake, handled right. There are 3 keys to powerful service recovery. 1. Act fast. Delay kills trust. A quick response shows urgency and care. 2. Own it. No excuses. No blame shifting. A simple, "We messed up, and here's what we're doing to fix it," goes a long way. 3. Go above and beyond. Don't just fix the issue. Surprise them. Add something extra, something human. But here's where it gets interesting. This doesn't just apply to businesses. It applies to friendships, relationships, leadership. When you mess up, say the wrong thing, forget an important date, fail to show up, you have a window, a chance to show who you really are. You can ignore it, pretend it didn't happen, or you can say, "I see the harm I caused. I'm sorry. I want to fix it." That's recovery. And when done well, it can build a stronger bond than before. In a world obsessed with perfection, the recovery paradox reminds us of something deeper. It's not about being flawless. It's about being accountable. It's about turning a crack into a bond. Because trust isn't built in moments of success. It's built in the response to failure. So the next time something breaks, don't fear it. See it as a chance to prove your values, to exceed expectations, to connect, not just correct. Because sometimes, the greatest loyalty comes not from getting it right the first time, but from caring enough to make it right the second. The tolerance paradox. When tolerance becomes dangerous. We like to think of tolerance as a universal good. Accept others, respect differences, live and let live. And in most cases that's true. Tolerance is the foundation of peaceful societies, diverse communities, and open dialogue. But what if I told you that unlimited tolerance could destroy tolerance itself? This is the tolerance paradox. First proposed by philosopher Karl Popper in 1945, the paradox goes like this. If a society is tolerant without limit, if it tolerates even the intolerant, then the intolerant will use that tolerance to destroy it. They'll exploit open speech to spread hatred. They'll use democracy to dismantle democracy, and slowly, they'll erode the very freedoms that allowed them in. Imagine a group enters a peaceful, open society. They preach division, they incite violence, they spread fear and hate, but when challenged, they say, "We're just expressing our opinion." And because the society is tolerant, it lets them speak, lets them organize, even lets them run for power. But soon, they begin silencing others, not with ideas, but with threats, not with debate, but with control. And by the time people realize what's happening, it's too late. Popper wasn't saying we should become intolerant of everyone. He wasn't arguing for censorship of opposing views. He was making a more subtle point. Tolerance is not passive. It must defend itself. It must draw a line. A line that says, we will tolerate a wide range of beliefs, but we will not tolerate those who seek to eliminate tolerance itself. In modern times, this paradox has played out in chilling ways. In Nazi Germany, the early Weimar Republic was one of the most tolerant societies of its time. But it tolerated parties that openly declared their intent to destroy democracy. Hitler was elected. And once in power, the intolerance began. Book burnings, arrests, silencing of press, and ultimately, genocide. We see echoes today, extremist groups using social media to recruit, hate speech disguised as free speech, movements gaining influence not by offering better ideas, but by attacking the very framework that lets ideas compete. So how do we respond? Where's the line? Popper said that the line is drawn not at opinions, but at actions and intent. If a group actively works to silence others, incite violence, or dismantle democratic institutions, they must not be tolerated. Not because we fear difference, but because we protect the very principle that allows differences to exist. This isn't easy. It feels contradictory. To preserve openness, we must sometimes close the door, but it's a necessary contradiction. The paradox teaches us that freedom comes with responsibility, that if we want to live in a tolerant world, we can't be naive about those who want to take that world away. Tolerance isn't weakness, and boundaries aren't bigotry. They are the shield that protects diversity, expression, and peace. So next time someone weaponizes tolerance, asks you to accept the unacceptable, remember, tolerance without limits leads to its own extinction. And true tolerance, real, enduring tolerance, has the courage to say, no, we draw the line here, not because we hate freedom, but because we love it enough to fight for it. The card paradox. A lie that tells the truth. You pick up a card, just a simple white card with black letters on both sides. On the front, it says, "The statement on the other side of this card is true." You turn it over. The back says, "The statement on the other side of this card is false." Wait. You flip it again. This side is true. This side is false. And suddenly you feel it. Your brain, twisting, caught in a loop it can't escape. This is the card paradox, a modern spin on an ancient logical riddle. Two statements, each pointing to the other, each claiming something about truth and falsehood. And the moment you try to resolve it, the ground beneath logic begins to shake. Because if the first statement is true, then the second statement must be true. But the second statement says the first is false. And if the second is true, then the first is false. But the first says the second is true, which means the second must be false. Wait, what? You've just stepped into self-referential paradox, a loop where statements refer back to each other in a way that logic can't cleanly resolve. It's like a hall of mirrors, each reflection contradicting the next. And it's not just wordplay. This kind of paradox reveals something deeply broken in the foundations of certainty. Because even when the sentences are grammatically perfect, they can still be logically impossible. You might think this is just a cute brain teaser, but in truth, paradoxes like this have shaken the core of mathematics, language, and philosophy. In the early 20th century, thinkers like Bertrand Russell and Kurt Gödel faced these kinds of self-referential problems and discovered that in any complex system, there are true statements that cannot be proven. This idea shook the dream of perfect logic, a dream that every truth could be known, that every question had an answer, that reality could be fully mapped by reason. The card paradox is a whisper of that chaos. It's the simplest doorway into the abyss, a reminder that sometimes the very tools we use to understand the world, language, reason, logic, can trap us in loops we cannot break, like a compass that spins in every direction at once, or a sign that says, "Ignore this sign." And yet there's something profound here. The paradox doesn't break logic. It reveals its boundaries. It shows that language isn't a flawless mirror, that truth can be twisted by recursion, that even simple statements can contain deep instability. This is why philosophers fear and adore paradoxes, because they're not just puzzles, they're portals. Think of artificial intelligence, programming, or law. These systems rely on logic, on rules that must be followed. But what happens when the rules contradict themselves? What if a program says, "This line of code will never be executed," and yet it is? Or a law that says, "All laws apply to everyone except this one." These aren't just theoretical headaches, they are the cracks in the architecture of control. The card paradox is simple, but it holds within it the same paradox that Gödel used to show, that no mathematical system can prove all its truths. It's the same logic behind the liar's paradox. This statement is false. If it's false, then it's true. If it's true, then it's false. A snake eating its own tail. An infinite loop. A glitch in the code of reality. So next time you hold a card, with one side calling the other true and the other calling it false, don't dismiss it as nonsense. It's not just a trick, it's a crack in the fabric of logic, a riddle without resolution, a reminder that even truth has shadows, and sometimes the deepest truths are the ones that can't be pinned down at all. The paradox of the raven. You're walking through a forest. The leaves crunch under your feet. The air smells like pine. And suddenly, you see it. A raven, black as shadow, perched silently on a branch. You pause and think to yourself, yes, that matches what I've always believed. All ravens are black. Seems obvious, right? But what if I told you that finding a green apple in your kitchen also supports the idea that all ravens are black? This is the raven paradox, also known as Hempel's paradox, named after German logician Karl Hempel. It starts with a simple claim: all ravens are black. Now in logic, if we want to prove that statement, we look for evidence. Black ravens. Every black raven we observe supports the claim. But here's where things get weird. The statement "all ravens are black" is logically equivalent to, if something is not black, then it is not a raven. Let that sink in. All ravens are black. Same as saying, everything that is not black is not a raven. So if you observe a green apple, you're observing something that is not black, and it's not a raven. That confirms the statement, doesn't it? After all, the apple didn't break the rule. So, technically, you've just found evidence for the idea that all ravens are black by looking at fruit. And that feels wrong. This is the paradox. Our intuition tells us that only seeing ravens matters, but logic tells us that every non-black, non-raven is also part of the equation. According to strict logic, every time you see a red chair, a blue fish, a white cloud, you're collecting evidence that ravens are all black. But your brain says, wait, that can't be right. That's the tension between logic and intuition. So who's correct? Is the green apple really evidence? Should scientists include tables, shoes, dolphins, and snowflakes in their studies on raven colours? Hempel and other philosophers struggled with this. They realised there's a gap between formal logic and human understanding of evidence. Yes, the green apple technically supports the claim, but it's a very weak piece of evidence. A black raven provides much stronger support because it's a direct instance of the category in question. The paradox forces us to ask, what does it mean to confirm a hypothesis? Is every matching observation equal? Or does the context and relevance matter? Statisticians and philosophers now distinguish between logical equivalence and practical relevance. Just because two statements are logically identical doesn't mean their confirmations carry the same weight. Imagine you're a detective. You're trying to prove that all the suspects wear black shoes. Finding another suspect with black shoes, strong evidence. Finding a cat in the alley wearing no shoes, technically consistent, but not helpful. The raven paradox is like that. It shows that logic alone isn't enough. We need judgment. We need to weigh evidence by its strength, not just its consistency. In a way, the paradox is a mirror held up to the way we think, reason, and believe. It warns us, don't confuse validity with relevance. Don't let formal structure blind you to practical sense. It also shows how fragile logic can be when it's pulled into the messiness of the real world. Even something as simple as the color of a bird can break our confidence in how evidence works. So next time you see a raven or a green apple, think about this. Both may be part of the same argument, one directly, one indirectly, but both remind us that truth isn't always black and white. Sometimes, truth shows up in strange colors, even green. The time travel paradox. It begins with a machine. Maybe it hums, maybe it glows, or maybe it's nothing more than a flicker in your mind, a thought that breaks the rules of time. You step into the machine, you set the date, the past, and suddenly you're gone. You've traveled through time, but what happens next shakes the very foundation of causality. You arrive in the past. Maybe it's a century ago. Maybe it's yesterday. You see people you shouldn't be able to see. You touch objects that shouldn't be touched. You make a choice. And that choice changes something small, but significant. And then you realize you've altered the path that led you to invent the time machine in the first place. This is the time travel paradox, also known as the grandfather paradox. A traveler goes back in time and does something that prevents their own existence. The classic example, you go back in time and accidentally or intentionally prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother, which means your parent was never born, which means you were never born, which means you never built the time machine, which means you never traveled back. But if you didn't travel back, then your grandfather was never stopped, so your parent was born, and so were you. And you do go back, and you do stop him, and it loops again, and again, and again. This is the paradox. Cause and effect collapse into a circle, a loop where logic eats itself. The paradox forces a terrifying question. Can time be changed at all? If so, how does the universe resolve contradictions? There are several proposed answers. One is the consistency principle, made popular by physicist Igor Novikov. It says, you can travel back in time, but you can't change anything. Whatever you do in the past was already part of history. Your presence there, your actions, they were always meant to happen. So if you tried to stop your grandfather, something would prevent it. Your gun jams, you slip, or fate intervenes in a way that preserves the timeline. It's like the universe defends itself from paradox. Another idea is the multiverse theory. You go back and change something, but you don't alter your original timeline. Instead, you create a new branch, a parallel universe where things unfold differently. In your new world, you were never born. But back in your original universe, everything remains intact. This solves the paradox by separating cause and effect into different realities. But it comes at a cost. You can never go back to your original world. You're just a visitor in an alternate thread. Some scientists say time travel is impossible altogether, precisely because of these paradoxes. They believe the laws of physics prevent time loops. That time is a river with one direction. No machines, no shortcuts, no second chances. But others aren't so sure. General relativity allows for the theoretical possibility of closed time-like curves, loops in space-time where time bends back on itself. And quantum mechanics is even stranger. Particles have been observed doing things that seem to defy causality altogether. So maybe, just maybe, the paradox isn't a wall. Maybe it's a door. Time travel doesn't just break clocks. It breaks assumptions. It asks, what is cause? What is effect? Is time a line, a loop, a spiral? It forces us to question if the future is fixed, or if the past is fragile. And in doing so, it makes us confront the most human fear of all. What if we could undo what we've done? Would we dare? So next time you imagine stepping into a time machine, think carefully, because the past is not just a destination. It's a minefield. One misstep, and reality might tear itself apart. The paradox isn't just in time. It's in us, in our desire to control, to rewrite, to escape. But some things are not meant to be rewritten. The paradox of the court. In ancient Greece, the sun is high, marble columns gleam in the heat, and two men stand in a courtroom, not enemies, not strangers, but teacher and student. The teacher's name, Protagoras, one of the most respected philosophers and legal minds of his time. The student, Euathlus, a bright young man hungry to learn the art of persuasion. They made a deal that would later twist itself into one of the most famous paradoxes in history. Protagoras agreed to teach Euathlus everything he knew about law and rhetoric. In return, Euathlus would pay his teacher, but only after he won his first case in court. A fair deal, it seemed. Protagoras would invest in his student, and the student would pay back once his knowledge proved useful. So the lessons began. Arguments, logic, debate. Time passed. Euathlus finished his training, but he never took on a case. Month after month, year after year, he avoided courtrooms completely. No lawsuits, no trials, no fees paid. Eventually, Protagoras lost his patience. He brought Euathlus to court and sued him for the unpaid tuition. And then the paradox emerged, because both men presented airtight, logical arguments that completely contradicted each other. Protagoras argued, "If I win this case, the court orders you to pay me. If I lose, then you've won your first case, which means you must pay me according to our agreement." "So either way," he said, "you must pay me." Seems unbeatable, right? But then Euathlus replied with equal cunning, "If I lose, the court says I don't have to pay. If I win, I still don't have to pay, because I haven't won another case yet. This is just the first one. So either way," he said, "I don't owe you anything." And there it was, a perfect loop, a legal ouroboros. Each side used logic to trap the other, spinning the courtroom into a whirlpool of paradox. If the court ruled for Protagoras, Euathlus technically wins, and by winning, he should pay. But if he wins, he argues he doesn't have to pay yet. If the court rules for Euathlus, Protagoras loses. And by their deal, Euathlus still hasn't won a case, so he still doesn't owe. Every judgment creates a contradiction. It's a paradox not just of payment, but of justice. Because in either outcome, someone is logically correct, yet justice is not fully served. The court finds itself in a trap, bound by logic, but broken by consequence. This isn't just a clever brain teaser. It's a challenge to the legal system itself. It asks, what happens when two valid arguments cancel each other out? When reason becomes a weapon and truth splits into two opposing lines of logic? It also shows the danger of conditional contracts, agreements that seem clear until tested by reality. And it reveals a deeper truth. Sometimes logic cannot deliver fairness. Sometimes both parties can be right. And still, justice is impossible. This paradox has echoed through centuries. It's taught in law schools, debated in philosophy seminars, and used to show the limits of rational thinking when applied to human systems. It's also a warning that the search for absolute consistency can backfire. That law without compassion can become a trap. That cleverness is not the same as wisdom. In the end, no one knows how the ancient court ruled. The outcome was lost to time. But the paradox lived on, a riddle buried in the heart of every courtroom. So next time you hear someone say, "Let the law decide," remember, sometimes the law can't. Sometimes it's the law itself that needs defending. And no lawyer, no matter how skilled, can escape a paradox built from his own words. Curry's paradox. Imagine someone walks up to you and says the following sentence: "If this statement is true, then unicorns exist." You laugh because it's absurd. But then you stop and you think, and slowly something begins to unravel. Because this isn't just a strange sentence. It's a logical bomb. A sentence so self-referential, so slippery, that it can prove anything, even the impossible. Welcome to Curry's paradox. It's not a riddle. It's not a trick. It's a genuine paradox, one that challenges the foundations of logic and mathematics. It works like this. Let's say we define a sentence. If this sentence is true, then 2 plus 2 are 5. Now let's assume the sentence is true. If it's true, then what it claims must follow. And what it claims is, if this sentence is true, then 2 plus 2 are 5. So if it's true, then 2 plus 2 are 5. Wait, what? We just proved something obviously false just by accepting that a certain sentence is true. That's the trap of Curry's paradox. If we allow certain kinds of self-referential sentences, we can use logic itself to prove anything we want. even things that are clearly untrue. It's different from the liar paradox. The liar paradox says, this sentence is false, and it loops forever. If it's true, then it's false. If it's false, then it's true. Curry's paradox is sneakier. It doesn't contradict itself. It just opens a back door that lets anything walk in. Unicorns, time travel, that your cat is the president of the moon, as long as the sentence is phrased right. If this statement is true, then insert anything here. The paradox lets it pass. And here's the terrifying part. This paradox doesn't rely on contradiction. It doesn't break the rules. It uses them perfectly. That's why it's so dangerous. It shows up in mathematical logic, in systems built to be perfectly consistent, like set theory, formal logic, and even the foundations of computer science. And it forces a question we don't like asking. Can logic be too powerful? In classical logic, there's a rule called modus ponens. It says, if P implies Q is true and P is true, then Q must be true. Curry's paradox takes that rule and bends it into a weapon. It builds a sentence that includes itself, claims if I'm true, then Q, and tricks the system into accepting Q, whatever it may be. It doesn't matter if Q is absurd or false or fictional. Once the structure is allowed, the system falls. This is why logicians and mathematicians take Curry's paradox seriously. In certain logical systems, like naive set theory, it destroys consistency, which means it becomes possible to prove anything. And when anything is provable, nothing can be trusted. So how do we fix it? There are several strategies. One is to restrict self-reference. Don't allow sentences to refer to themselves at all. Another approach is to weaken or alter rules like modus ponens, but this risks damaging the power of logic itself. Others use typed logic systems or special hierarchies to separate statements into safe layers, like quarantining infectious logic. But none of these fixes come without cost. Because Curry's paradox isn't just a bug, it's a feature of language, of structure, of systems that try to talk about themselves. It reminds us that language has edges, that self-reference is a slippery slope, that even in the world of pure logic, where everything seems cold and perfect and solid, there are shadows. And in those shadows, paradoxes like Curry's wait, not to confuse us, but to warn us. So next time you read a sentence that seems simple, pause. Because that sentence might not just say something, it might do something. It might shift truth itself. In logic, sometimes the most dangerous thing is not what a statement says, but what it implies about itself. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. Buridan's ass. When perfect logic leads to starvation. In a sunlit field, under a cloudless sky, a donkey stands motionless. To his left, a bundle of fresh hay. To his right, an identical bundle. Same size, same distance, same smell, same appeal. There is no difference between the two, and the donkey is hungry, but he does not move. He looks left, he looks right, he calculates, compares. No bundle is better, no choice makes more sense. And so he waits, and waits, until, eventually, he dies of hunger. Not because he was lazy, not because he was indecisive, but because logic failed him. This is the fable of Buridan's ass, a story that's been retold for centuries, named after the French philosopher Jean Buridan, though it's unclear if he ever used it himself. Still, the paradox is clear. If a perfectly rational being is faced with two identical options and has no reason to choose one over the other, what happens? According to strict logic, nothing. The creature can't choose because no option is better, so he freezes indefinitely. It's a paradox of decision-making, of free will, and of the dangers of perfect rationality. Because if you demand that every decision must be based on logic and two options are exactly equal, you're stuck. This paradox isn't just about donkeys. It's about us, humans, computers, artificial intelligences, anything that's asked to choose in a world that often offers symmetry without guidance. Let's take a closer look. Buridan's ass assumes a creature that is fully rational. No instinct, no randomness, no emotion. But real-life decisions aren't like that. People flip coins. They choose based on a hunch. They act out of impatience or habit. This reveals something deep. Sometimes irrationality is necessary. Sometimes randomness saves us. Imagine a self-driving car approaches two identical roads. It has no data suggesting one is better than the other. If it's programmed like Buridan's ass, strictly rational, it might stop and never continue. That's why systems need a built-in bias, a tiebreaker, a way to resolve symmetry, even if it's arbitrary, even if it feels silly, because indecision, when left unchecked, becomes paralysis. And in the real world, paralysis kills. The paradox also stretches into ethics and morality. What if you must choose between saving two people, same age, same health, same situation? If you wait for more data, you might save neither. Here, Buridan's ass becomes a warning, not just about logic, but about overthinking. It teaches that action sometimes matters more than analysis, that doing something, even imperfectly, is better than doing nothing perfectly. Some have tried to solve the paradox by pointing out that no two options are ever truly identical. One bundle of hay will have a leaf that curls slightly more. The wind will blow slightly stronger on one side. The donkey might subconsciously lean left. And that's true. In real life, perfect symmetry doesn't exist. But the paradox remains useful as a model, a metaphor, a mirror held up to logic itself. In artificial intelligence, Buridan's ass reminds engineers to build in noise, randomness, bias, momentum. In philosophy, it forces a debate about freedom and determinism. And in everyday life, it's a whisper in your ear every time you overthink. Every time you scroll through endless restaurant options, compare two almost identical jobs, or stand in a store aisle unable to pick a cereal. In the end, Buridan's ass is tragic not because he was foolish, but because he was too rational. He died in a state of perfect balance, a prisoner of symmetry. His story teaches us that life often demands more than logic. It demands movement, impulse, decision, because even a step in the wrong direction is better than standing still forever. The Abilene Paradox. It's a scorching summer afternoon in Texas. A family sits quietly on the porch, sipping iced tea, doing nothing in particular. Then, someone, maybe the father, says, "Hey, how about we all drive to Abilene and get some dinner?" The others nod politely. "Sure, sounds good. Why not? Yeah, let's go." So they pile into a hot, dusty car with no AC. Drive 50 miles through heat and wind. Eat a disappointing meal. Drive all the way back. When they return, tired, sweaty, and mildly irritated, one of them finally blurts out, "Honestly, I didn't even want to go." Another joins in. Me neither. I thought you wanted to go. And then the father says, I only suggested it because I thought you all were bored. Silence falls, because that's when it hits them. None of them wanted to go. They all went to please each other. This is the Abilene paradox, a strange, almost absurd phenomenon where people, groups, teams, even entire organizations end up taking actions that nobody actually wants, simply because everyone assumes someone else does. It's not just about bad road trips. It's about how fear of disagreement, desire for harmony, and assumptions about others' desires can trap us in choices we regret. The term was coined by management expert Jerry B. Harvey in 1974, based on that exact story with his own family. But it reflects something universal: how we avoid rocking the boat, how we stay polite, how we nod and smile, even when we want to scream no. In the name of avoiding conflict, we walk straight into dysfunction. You might be thinking, surely this only happens in awkward family dinners. But no, the Abilene paradox shows up everywhere. In corporate meetings, where teams agree to launch projects no one believes in. In politics, where leaders vote for policies they privately oppose. In relationships, where people agree to plans they dread, thinking they're being considerate. It's not about peer pressure in the classic sense. No one is forcing anyone. There's no villain. The pressure is internal. It's the assumption, if I speak up, I'll ruin the mood. If I say no, I'll be the problem. If I object, I'll let them down. So you say yes, they say yes, and everyone ends up in Abilene. Paradox reveals a powerful truth. Silence is not agreement. And yet, silence often masquerades as consent, especially in group settings. You've seen it. A manager floats a bad idea. No one speaks. So it gets approved. Only later do people admit, I thought that was a mistake from the start. So how do we break the cycle? The first step is creating space for dissent. Organizations need cultures where disagreement is safe, where it's not just tolerated, but encouraged. People need to ask not just, does anyone object, but, is this what we actually want? Is anyone agreeing just to keep the peace? These questions bring hidden reluctance to light. The second step is personal courage. The courage to say, I'm not sure that's a good idea, or even, I don't want to go to Abilene. Not to be difficult, not to sabotage harmony, but to save it. Because real harmony isn't about pretending we agree. It's about trusting each other enough to tell the truth. In some ways, the Abilene paradox is more dangerous than open conflict, because everyone thinks they're cooperating while walking into collective failure. And when things fall apart, everyone looks around and says, but I thought we all agreed. It's a paradox of perception, where the fear of disagreement creates a shared illusion of consensus. So next time you're in a group and something feels off, ask yourself, do I really want this? Or am I just going along? And if the answer is no, say something, because speaking up might feel risky. But silence can take you all the way to Abilene.